Hi. I'm going to do another TV musing thing before we get to the last episode of WandaVision, which I'll be doing Friday or Saturday or whatever. But I wanted to kind of just share some thoughts for what it's worth about some shows that I've been watching recently, thinking about recently, ones that I don't have on Blu-ray, so it doesn't fall under that show. It belongs here. I'm not going to do any in-depth review of any one thing, but I just want to throw a few things out there. Today, I hope you guys are doing okay. I'm chilling out, listening to the Volume 4, Black Sabbath Volume 4 outtakes. Somebody collected all of them from the Super Deluxe Edition that's out now. Some of this I've never heard before, ever. I know I talk about Black Sabbath too much, so I'm going to try to refrain, but this is kind of, I saw this, I always put on background music for these videos, which you guys pretty much can't make out, which is probably good because my videos might get pulled for copyright infringement. I made a video one time when I put up to Facebook of my cat playing, and Dio Holy Diver was playing in the background. The video got pulled, and I was sad because it was a cool video of my cat. But anyway, um, so yeah, so what are some shows I've been watching over the last few months or weeks or days, and I've been thinking about. Uh, One thing that I couldn't find really a slot for within my other videos about TV that I've made or thought about making, and doesn't really, I don't really have enough meat about it to do a whole show on it, but I'm going to talk about it here. Is the Watchmen series on HBO. I know it came out last year or whatever. I just recently found out that it got nominated for like two dozen Emmys or something like that, and it won like 10. I'm rounding them up, but those aren't the exact numbers. I do like exact numbers, but that's not exactly right. But I do know that I think it won for best limited series. It won for uh, I think it won for best actress for Regina King. I know it won for best supporting actor. That man, I love Yahya Abdul-Mateen II. He's incredible. He keeps popping up in stuff I like, and I think he's one of the coolest new actors I've seen in a long time. Um, so yeah, he think he won an Emmy for that. I'm pretty sure. So anyway, uh, yeah. So what was the series like to me? I was trying to describe it to someone the other day because we were talking about the comic book and the movie by Zack Snyder that came out like 2008. Um, I didn't like the movie. I mean, I liked it at the time. Okay. I mean, it was like this is the best we're going to get. This is the compromise we're going to end up with. You know, we've got to live with the ending being different and changing the context of that from the comics. We've got to kind of live with the fact that the action is more glamorized and stylized, whereas in the comic book, there's no romanticizing the violence in the comic and the action. There's not really action per se. There's just conflict and occasional violence, which is kind of like my stories are kind of like that. There's not a lot of action, maybe a little, but I mean, not like you think of it as. Um, the Watchmen series is the same way. I'll get back to that. Um, yeah, the movie over the years has not aged well, in my opinion. The effects are great. Um, Casting is overall not real good. There are some exceptions. Jackie Earle Haley played Rorschach, was really good. I thought Patrick Wilson as Night Owl, even though he didn't exhibit the body type of Dan from the comics, he was really good in the role. He's really sympathetic. Um, I don't know. The majority of other people were either really miscast or just weren't very good actors. Well, one major exception is Stephen McHattie as the original Night Owl, but he's brilliant at everything. So, you know, I didn't want there to be a series, of course. Most fans of the comic did when it was first announced. You know, but there's some people who are fans of the movie were kind of excited about it, and just superficially it might be cool. But the question everyone had was, how the hell are they going to do it? Like, when's it going to take place? What characters are going to be in it? What is left after Watchmen? What is left there to say after Watchmen? And I don't know that there really was much to say. So Daniel Lindelof, or Daniel, is that his name? Lindelof? Damon Lindelof. He worked on Lost and some other series I can't remember. I've never really been that interested in his work. Though Lost was pretty good, what I saw of it. Um, I'm not a fan of J.J. Abrams, but that's kind of been established on this channel. I don't hate him, you know. I liked elements of Lost, elements of Alias, but I haven't been impressed with his cinematic work and most of his. It's cool that he produced Westworld, which is incredible. So when he's helping other people, that's cool. Um, but you know, in any case, Lindelof is a guy not of the stature of Abrams, but in TV, he's a major deal now. He's considered a great writer and innovator and modern kind of innovator. And he's also gone on record a lot saying that one of his very biggest influences of doing the kind of television he does is Twin Peaks. And it's like, yeah, duh. I mean, how can it not be, really? And so that's kind of cool. But anyway, so he didn't really have anything new to say in that same register. In other words, there wasn't this whole meta thing where, you know, Alan Moore is like using a comic book to comment on comic books, using superheroes to comment on superheroes, and all these different layers going on. But Lindelof did want to do the topical aspect of it. And at the time that Watchmen came out, the comic book, the topical reference was, you know, potentially World War III happening. I grew up in the Reagan years, and it was pretty. In some ways, it was better than it is now and looser, not because of Reagan. I just mean in general in America society. But in other ways, I mean, in a lot of ways, it was more conservative than it is now. But in a lot of ways, it was more liberal than it is now. It's we're kind of coming full circle to this neo Cold War, neo conservative, neo liberal. This whole neo fucking mentality is just destroying the planet. But that's for another video. But anyway, a big thing with Reagan was he talked a lot of smack about Russia, kind of the way people do now. See, I mean, how far we've fallen. Um, okay, so I hated Reagan, and the time was kind of taboo to hate Reagan. I mean, a lot of people did, but then again, they were usually fringe people, underground people. They said it in public, but they more like it was shushed a lot. Like, no, no, you know, he's great, and you know, he won by a landslide twice, and you know, everybody looks at, you know, material accomplishment or power and money as the measure of a person. So they thought Reagan was like the bomb, you know. Whereas actually Reagan just wanted to bomb things. And his attitude toward Russia in hindsight, I thought this kind of at the time, but it was an unformed thought being a young person. It was childish. It was xenophobic and stupid, and it still is. I thought at the time it was stupid. I hated the propaganda against Russia. I had no problems with Russia. I didn't think in those terms. I never understood the Cold War. I mean, I kind of understand it now, but I think it's bullshit. But I mean, I kind of get why people are doing it. And it's not for good reasons. Keeping this kind of weird balance of power, this kind of like any minute the world could blow up, 2 minutes to midnight scenario. And Watchmen was a big part of Watchmen was exploring that. Maybe the biggest part, besides the dissection of superheroes, like in their psychology. So Moore kind of juxtaposed those things together and made it kind of topical. So Lindelof, without that other aspect of it so much, though he did try a little bit to comment that way, but it's not in a comic book format, so he's not using it the same way Alan Moore did. Which is one major reason that maybe Watchmen should have never been made into a movie, because it was of its medium, about its medium, more or less. It was designed to be a comic book. Um, so Lindelof, though, to his credit, he takes the continuity from the comic books, not from the movie. So, in other words, the comic book is canon, everything that happened in it. Whereas in the film, you know, the ending's been changed and other details have been changed here and there. And as far as when it takes place more or less the same time span onward that our world is spun beyond the Watchmen comic book. So 30 years on. So more or less the modern day, the mid 2015s, mid 2010s, late 2010s. And the first few episodes, I'm not really sure he's pulling it off. You know, it seems like his topical focus is race relations, which are, you know, have come full circle also. They're kind of at a low right now, and in America, and so that he made that the focus of it, and that was something Alan Moore didn't really touch on at all in the old comic book. So, but it is topical for today. Um, so he did that, and of course, a lot of the fanboys got mad. You know, there's black people in it, and the main character's a black woman, and oh my god, the world's gonna end, the sky's falling. I just wish those people would just fuck off. So anyway, same people who hated on Discovery for the same stupid reasons. Um, they hated that chick on Star Wars, the Asian girl, and then the black stormtrooper. I mean, you know, come on, why is fandom so full of these bitter racist assholes? This stuff wasn't made for them. It was made for people with a thinking apparatus that operates up here, not these Neanderthal subhumanoids, you know, proto pseudo quasi Klansmen. Um, so I wonder if I'll get banned from YouTube for saying this stuff. Oh well. So yeah, race relations. The main character is a black female. So I had no problem with that as it is, you know. But I did think her character. I didn't really understand her character's deep relevance to the comic book at first. She was a police officer, and this time, the police officers have co-opted the superheroes. Superheroism and vigilantism is still outlawed as it was in the comic by the Keene Act, and so which was passed under President Nixon in the late 70s, I believe, in Watchmen continuity. Um, Nixon stayed president for many, many years in the Watchmen continuity. And in the current continuity, like the Lindelof series, I believe the intention is that Robert Redford will be as president, because that was kind of joked about at the end of Watchmen. But they didn't get Robert Redford to appear on screen. They didn't really use his images. Um, so, sorry, I got a notification from a friend. I kind of So anyway, the police are now operating kind of like superheroes. They're anonymous because of anti-police sentiment. That's a comment in itself on what's going on now. And I have no problem with anti-police sentiment whatsoever. But anyway, so because of that, within the story, they're masked. They make little punny kind of superhero identities, kind of like Alan Moore's characters did. So Regina King's sister Knight, or Angela Abar as her real name, and you know, she has a friend played by Don Johnson who's like the sheriff or whatever. It takes place in Oklahoma, and you know he's pretty good. He might be a good old boy. You're not really sure. Francis Fisher plays his wife, and then by the end of the first episode, though, he's already written out. Even though he's always touted as like almost the main star besides Regina King, he's really not. But he's Don Johnson, and so he gets hanged in his yard, I believe, or some yard, and so it's like, wow, what's this all about? Nobody thinks that he's affiliated with the local racists in this story, which are part of this thing called the Seventh Cavalry, which they wear Rorschach masks. They misinterpreted Rorschach's journal, essentially. They kind of treated it like the Turner Diaries was treated in our reality, kind of like a manifesto to be followed. Um, so it appears he's not really one of them, and he might even be against them or trying to bust them. He seems to be friends with the minorities on the force. As the series goes on, though, we realize that he was also like a redneck racist all along, really. So you have to question, was his friendship with Angela genuine? You know, despite her being black, you know, did he get past that with her or with some of his colleagues? He was the only policeman who didn't hide his identity because he was the figurehead of everything. And they kind of theorized that made him an easy target for these extremists, but he really was one of the extremists. But you don't learn that for a while. Sorry, there's going to be lots of spoilers in this. For the next couple episodes, we bring in Laurie Blake from the old show, the old comic, who had been the second Silk Spectre. And she's played by Jean Smart, is that right? I think so. Oops. She's good. At first, she's annoying as hell. But then you realize that she's kind of become like her biological father over the years. She's a cynical, joke-cracking asshole. and who's pretty much conservative, like he was, right wing, but not right wing the way the Seventh Cavalry is, just more of like government overreach kind of way. Um, but she grows into the part. She inhabits it as the show goes on. So I was glad to see some older characters. We meet Jeremy Irons early on in the show, and it takes a couple episodes before we find out he's Adrian Veidt, the character also known as Ozymandias. It was basically the villain of the comic book series, who staged the false alien invasion that brought humanity more together and called an end to the Cold War. Um, but at this point, you wonder 30 years on that things are unraveling. People are misunderstanding Rorschach's diary. There's seemingly racial violence going on, and is it a matter of time before someone finds out the truth about Adrian Veidt and the truth about the alien invasion? What's it going to mean to humanity? I mean, how are they going to view that? They've been kind of suckered into peace, and which I've always thought that would be an interesting angle, and that is one they pursue in this. It takes a while to get that strand kind of going. But like I said, first few episodes, the first one was just the setup, and it wasn't very promising to me personally. It didn't seem to have, other than the backdrop, it didn't really seem to have much concrete to do with the comic book. So as the next couple episodes unfolded, I tried to see it as its own thing, and I liked it a little better. I thought it was still moving really slow, I guess very deliberate, you could say. It was only 10 episodes, I think. And so episode I believe it was episode 4 or 5 that changed my mind because it focused on one of these cops who had the alias Looking Glass, and he was kind of this, seeming like an aging redneck guy himself. He was just basically an Oklahoman guy. He was a good guy. Tim Blake Nelson played him. He was really good, and he had a strong connection to the comic book story, which is that, and he wasn't in the comic book story, but they posited that he, as a young person, was uh, kind of at one of the ground zeros when the staged alien invasion went off, and he suffered through it and saw it and saw that devastation. And apparently, he was like a Mormon kind of guy, like a straight lace, and that kind of shook his faith. But in the modern day, he's a cop, but he's also kind of a conspiracy theorist. He literally has like tinfoil hats and things. And so we're not really sure what to make of him. He's a likable guy, but we're not really sure what side he's going to end up on, or is he really a guy worth respecting? But Angela seems to like him, and she's kind of one-dimensional at first. She's just kind of a hard ass, really. There's not a lot to her. As Sister Knight, she, beats up people and criminals, and she seems like a cool person, but there's not a lot of anchor there. There is, however, an unfolding mystery about her biological grandfather that she never knew, who we finally learned was this guy named Reeves, was that his name? And this guy was a guy that we actually see in the beginning of the series. In the beginning of the series, we see a flashback to the 1920s destruction of Black Wall Street in Oklahoma. And so we see a young kid whose parents are killed. And so that kid is her grandfather, 100 years, almost 100 years on. But he's more than that. And that's where it gets really cool and interesting. It's played by Louis Gossett Jr. in the present day. And um, so we started to kind of see these strands as mystery, like who killed Don Johnson, and who is the grandfather guy, and then there's this Asian woman, a Vietnamese woman, who has this corporation and high technology and is doing all this experimental stuff. And then Adrian Veidt is on his own little, we don't know where he is. He's on some big old English manor estate with these kind of clones, and it's more humorous and absurdist kind of things going on. He starts launching them into space and doing all kinds of weird things with them. So um, it all kind of comes together by like the 5th and 6th episode. So what we realize is that he is Ozymandias, and that this place is something that was created for him by Dr. Manhattan. I think it's called Europa, and it was like where he created his own people, his own life, which are these clones. And but it was also kind of his exile, almost like his exile by Dr. Manhattan, or his self-exile for the guilt of knowing what he actually did in the 80s. to achieve world peace. Though, it's hard to tell how much he regrets it or not. Jeremy Irons kind of plays this character very droll. He's a good casting. I mean, if he were younger, a lot younger, he would have been a good fit for that character, despite his British, accent, which he sort of hides in this, but not too well. But it's great, as we see these connections come forward. So you're wondering, are any other characters who lived through Watchmen going to emerge? Dan never does. Spoiler. I think they referred him one time, but there's no follow up. There's no thing on him. I think there was a reason why they did that, and I don't remember what it was off the top of my head. Maybe they didn't want to shift the focus away from Angela too much. But there is another major character who emerges because as we explore Angela, she's got this husband Cal, and she's got a couple adopted, really Vietnamese kids because in that reality, America won the Vietnam War, and Vietnam became the 51st state of America. It's pretty crazy. So, Angela was born in Vietnam, I think, but she met her husband in Vietnam, and again, we're just talking about the country long after the war and everything, but it's after it's been annexed by the U.S. And it took me a while to kind of figure all these pieces out because some of them I'd forgotten from the comics, some of the elements of it, and also it doesn't reveal itself very easily. It takes quite a while to really get the pieces together. But once it does, it's incredible. Like the last half of the series, I loved every episode, and it got more and more powerful because we started exploring Cal and her husband, Angela and her husband Cal, played by Yahya Abdul-Mateen, and so I really enjoyed that dynamic. I enjoyed his portrayal. She started to get more depth when you see her family, and as she finally, confronts her grandfather and doesn't know what he's about, doesn't necessarily like what he's about, which she does know. And then we find out we have an origin devoted to him, an episode devoted to his origin. He is also a character from Watchmen, the comic book. He is the original, the very first vigilante on that Earth, in the late 30s, I guess, is Hooded Justice. So you're like, Hooded Justice, well, wasn't he a white guy? Well, no, he wasn't. So they make this incredible origin. And also, wasn't he like gay because, this guy's got grandchildren? Yes, he was. So they haven't changed anything. They've just explained how these things came to be. That's pretty awesome. So his motivation, I believe he's a cop. And of course, there weren't many black cops then. So he gets nothing done, and everybody hates him. But he is obsessed with justice. So I think they try to hang him at one time. And so he makes the costume with the hood. It's a black hood instead of the Klan white hood, and it's a noose around his neck. That was from the comic book. And he does that as like a refutation of what happened to him. And he also puts a makeup around his eyes, which is about the only place you see his skin, to make everyone think he's a white vigilante. When actually he's a black vigilante, dealing with, racists, but also just criminals in general. And his really violent side comes out when he's Hooded Justice. All this frustration, because he's kind of bottled up because of the racism and what happened to his family in Oklahoma and Black Wall Street. And he does, get married, but he does have a boyfriend. One of the Watchmen, Captain Metropolis, and him are sleeping together, and that's something that is directly from the old comic book. Well, it was implied strongly, I guess. It wasn't really shown on camera. Because Hooded Justice seemed like an S&M kind of guy. It seemed like he supposedly got sexual pleasure from beating up the comedian in one scene, beating up criminals. Maybe he did. It's kind of on the edge there. I mean, he definitely has an explosive, violent side, but he tends to try to focus it on justice or good things, so to speak. But in the present day, he's this aged man played by Louis Gossett, and he's conspiring with this Vietnamese woman, rich Vietnamese scientist, and she turns out to be the daughter, via artificial insemination, of Adrian Veidt. So she's inherited kind of his brilliance, and she's taken over his company, and now it's True instead, Treu or Toue. That's her name. It's obviously a pun on truth and also on It sounds, looks like a Vietnamese name. It may really be a Vietnamese name. Um, so she is. They're all kind of conspiring, and what we finally learn, I'm not really sure who's on whose side, etc. But the gist of it is that the Seventh Cavalry wants to use this technology from Beat and True and transform themselves into gods, basically. I mean, mainly the leader, who turns out to be Keen, who's forgot his first name. He's the son of the senator who passed the Keene Act, and he's kind of a redneck, racist, smooth talking Southern kind of politician. He reminds me of a lot of politicians we've unfortunately had in office, and uh, he's pretty dislikable. And so then we find out he's the leader of this group, and then they want to co-opt Dr. Manhattan's power. So how are they going to do that? Dr. Manhattan's been gone. So yeah, he went to Mars. He created this place for Adrian Veidt. And eventually, we learned that because of the fact he doesn't live in a linear time, um, he experiences like all his life or all this stuff. He sees it all at once. There's no like linear path. So he's experiencing the past, present, and future. They established that simultaneously. They established that. So he sees, and then you wonder, well, he sees it in the future, so then he makes sure it happens. So is it predestination? What's the deal? Those are things you can mull over. But he sees that he's going to have another affair, like the one he had with Lori, who's now a character in this show, with a woman, and it's going to be Angela Abar. And when he meets her as Dr. Manhattan, I think they're in Paris, and it's a really cool scene. And then you realize that he becomes Cal, and Yahya Abdul-Mateen plays Dr. Manhattan too, in his Dr. Manhattan form. They allude to Dr. Manhattan originally being a white guy, John Osterman, but in his new reality, he's Cal, and then when he turns back into Dr. Manhattan, Yahya is still playing Dr. Manhattan. He's incredible, and so he basically erased his own memory and made himself kind of an avatar on Earth to live a mortal life. And he's so godlike, he kind of created out of whole cloth this being, and that becomes Angela's husband. And Angela has known all along that her husband is really Dr. Manhattan. I don't think he even knows it for a while. Now there are some things I've forgotten here. There are some things that tie together that I kind of don't quite remember. I know that Lori and Adrian Veidt and maybe Angela, I think, become allies, and they try to stop this thing. And Dr. Manhattan, they don't get his power, but he's destroyed. Even though he knows he's going to be destroyed, seemingly he dies. Which, how is that possible? So maybe he's not really dead. But it's still pretty tragic because Angela's lost her husband, and there's a whole kind of thing with Angela and her grandfather, and he's such a strange character. Gossett also was nominated for an acting award for this. But anyway, I've forgotten a lot, but that's the gist of the climax. Everything, the evil is foiled, and it is learned that Beat planned the invasion, and that comes out, and it doesn't linger for long on the bigger repercussions of it. But he's more or less brought to justice, so to speak, Beat. So it's not a perfect series. Now that I'm thinking back on it, it did have some flaws. It did have some slow, dead spots, but it kept the story pretty much on course. And I think it worked really well as a sequel. And I think it also worked well as the commentary on racism. And it wasn't too heavy-handed. It was just kind of even-handed enough. Because was Alan Moore heavy-handed for denouncing, Reagan and Nixon and the Cold War? Well, maybe he was. Maybe he was just right. And that's kind of the same thing with this. So Keene and his kind of, modern Klan, they're just kind of repugnant, and um, it's just interesting that Dr. Manhattan just happened to choose to be a black man in his new incarnation. And but again, he saw the future. So again, did he make it happen, or was it always destined to happen? He's just fulfilling it. He kind of tells Angela that when they first meet in Paris. Well, he's still Dr. Manhattan, not a Cal. So I recommend this. I think everybody should watch it. Nobody's really talking about it much lately, and that's understandable. I don't think there's going to be a follow up. Maybe there shouldn't be a follow up. Once again, Lindelof said he's not going to do another. Maybe someone else will. Since HBO, DC, Warner's, or whatever still have all these rights, and DC's like dragging the corpse of the Watchmen comic book through the streets, essentially by resurrecting those characters and having new stories and new continuities that really don't fit or don't make sense with the Watchmen comic book. Like this Rorschach miniseries that just started. They already explored the whole Rorschach as rough vigilante within the context of the DC universe in an issue of The Question 30 years ago that had him read Watchmen, The Question, and imagine him, meeting Rorschach and him becoming like Rorschach, because Rorschach began as a pastiche character of The Question. So yeah, I think the DC Comics stuff is superfluous. Maybe just a bit financially motivated, maybe egotistically motivated. Jeff Johns is a really great writer and a great storyteller, has great ideas, but for all the great stuff he writes, like for instance his screenplays to the Titans series are incredible. And I like a lot of his older comic work, but a lot of his work isn't that great. It's kind of it's like you can hear his gears grinding. Like, this is a great idea, I'm going to do it, and DC's like, yeah, and they pour money into it, but is it really a great idea? And I mean, I don't know. I think he's like the chief creative officer now at DC. He's kind of in charge of their continuity, their storytelling, which is great and also not so great at the same time. I'm glad he's going into television and boiling it down, and he's getting back to the kind of storytelling he did when he wrote JSA. At least that good, if not better. But I don't care for a lot of his later DC work and New 52 and all those incarnations. So him doing this Doomsday Clock with the Watchmen characters, I don't have any interest in that. The little I've seen of it just looks horrible. I don't know. Even the art's not that inspired. It's okay, but so anyway, I've slagged DC Comics enough. So anyway, but as far as the DC adaptations go, this is one of the best ones I've seen. It helps make, even though the Watchmen weren't originally DC Universe characters, but now kind of are, they're DC property. So it kind of continues this inroads they're making into quality television that they've started with the DC Universe channel, with Doom Patrol and Titans, both of which I think are brilliant, both of which I'll cover each in its own show as time goes on. I have Titans season 1 and 2 on Blu-ray. I have season 1 of Doom Patrol, and eventually, when I have money, I'll get season 2 of Doom Patrol, and then I'll talk about it, because I think it's my favorite thing on television, really. Close second would be something that's not going to be ongoing, though, would be WandaVision, which I will talk about in the next installment. So I've talked endlessly about this Watchmen show, so I really don't have time to talk about the other 2 or 3 shows I was going to talk about. I was going to talk about at least 2 others. So that's good. I've kind of padded it out, filled out the content. So I'll just leave the other ones for another episode when I have some other thoughts. But I will go ahead and say that one of the ones I'm going to talk about will be Black Lightning, which is now starting its 4th season. I've been a big fan since it started. Another great DC TV property. I'm not a fan of the CW Arrowverse continuity shows. I'm just not. I've experimented with them. I've given them a lot of chances, and I'm not a fan at all. Don't like them. Don't think they're horrible, but yeah, don't like them that much. Black Lightning is seemingly being on that network and being attached to that continuity now. You would think it'd fall into the same pitfalls, but no, it's its own beast. It always has been. And it's brilliant. And so anyway, I'll probably talk about that. I'd like to reflect on some older shows that I enjoy that still aren't out on Blu-ray. And one that is on Blu-ray, which I can't afford to buy, but I'm actually binging on for the first time right now, which is Breaking Bad. Started watching this in 2013 2014 with my ex-wife, and she got up to like about halfway through season 3. I saw sporadic episodes with her throughout the first 2.5 seasons. I don't remember a lot of them. There was an episode early in season 3 that, upon rewatching it, I totally remembered it, and I was wondering when that scene was going to take place, when it took place. So she actually got farther in the series than I thought she did, but then she said, "I'm not going to do Breaking Bad anymore because it's too depressing." So I have my theories as to why she thought that, but I'm not going to get into them. They're kind of personal stuff. Don't have to do with me, but to do with her. Um, but in any case, I'm now binging the whole series. So I started episode 1, and I'm almost to the end of season 3. So I already have tons of thoughts and opinions or whatever. Insights, no, maybe not insights, but this series has been dissected to death. But to be honest, I haven't read much about it. I haven't read many people's analysis of it or thoughts about it or any of that stuff, like its themes or its construction, or I've just read about the awards it had got and how it was kind of developed. The reputation it has, of course, is huge. Uh, but I do think that reputation is earned. I don't think it's overrated. Uh, I think it's rated about right because it is a cultural icon kind of thing now. But at the same time, you know, anybody, when one thing for Funko to make a pop figure of Heisenberg, and everybody go, yeah, man, Breaking Bad, they make meth, but that show's way deeper than that, any of that surface stuff. I mean, that stuff's kind of fun, and some of it's kind of cool, but um, there's a lot more to it. And I think the way it's written, directed, and acted, it's kind of, if it keeps up the quality through the end of the series that I'm hoping it does, which a couple of friends of mine said it does, I would definitely put it as one of my favorite series of all time. But anyway, I'm still going through that. Maybe next time I'll talk about that in detail, or maybe another time. So I'll see you on this TV show about TV in several days, and we'll wrap up WandaVision. I'm pretty excited. And then I'll do some other videos about something else another time. So